Stories that matter. The journey of life from birth to death is an extraordinary trip, sometimes filled with great joy and excitement, but at other times filled with pain, sorrow, and disappointment. Stories That Matter shares both extremes with you. Sometimes our stories will make you feel very happy, but the journey of life is not all happiness. Other times, the journey of life will make you feel sad, for all of us have experienced both extremes. Stories That Matter will begin right after the break with a story that will touch your heart in the journey of life.
Welcome to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, today with my special guest, Matt Townsend. And Matt is the city manager at Harrington. Matt, thank you so much for being here.
Doug, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure, and what I wanted to talk to you about today was, because Kansas has lots of small towns, Harrington is one of those small towns, and really want to be able to see what do you look at when you step into a town like you have for Harrington, and then what's the goal, and what's unique about being a small town with limited resources as opposed to being held to the same standard as Kansas City or Topeka or Wichita, and you don't have the kind of staff to be able to do that. We're going to talk a little bit about that because most of Kansas is covered by small towns. We're in the middle of one right now. This is Chapman. And you're at the Kansas Auto Racing Museum, and we're filming this at our studio. Well, Chapman's a small town. I served as city attorney here during the tornado. And so I'm very familiar with some of the problems that a small town has, especially when you go through a catastrophe like that. Matt, how did you get to be, how did you get into administration to where you gravitated towards being a city manager?
Well, I got my start in the city of Fredericksburg, which is located in central Texas. It's a town of approximately 11,000 people. And when I started my internship there, I actually worked directly for the city manager. I also worked for the public works director as well. And I had after I'd gotten my master's degree from the University of Texas, I had kind of been drifting toward the administrative side of it after talking to several of my professors, the internship as well, and also some of my colleagues that I'd gotten to know in the field. And it was just something that effectively, for me, public service is important. It's important to be able to do things for the community that you live in. I feel that, honestly, local government is hands down one of the best forms of government. No offense to my state and federal colleagues, of course, simply because we're the level of government that it is critical that you do interact with your populace. It's critical that you solve problems and you come together and you figure out ways to do things. Sometimes, as you mentioned a moment ago, especially in small towns, you have to be very creative about that. But it was just that opportunity to affect things, to change things, and honestly, to make places a better place to live, quite honestly, that really kind of, I guess, guided me into it, got me into it.
So where's home for you originally?
Originally Central Texas area.
Central Texas. And then you went to college where?
University of Texas at Austin.
Yeah, you said that. And then that's where you got your master's also?
Well, I got my master's degree from the University of Texas at San Antonio. Actually, after I got out of the University of Texas at Austin, I was a school teacher for a few years.
What did you teach?
I taught history and special education.
At high school level?
Oh, no, middle school level.
Middle school level. Well, awesome. And then you decided you wanted to go into government.
After I had been teaching for about 6 years, I determined that although I enjoyed the interactions with certainly the kids, certainly with the parents and the things that we were doing there, the overall education system was not something that I felt was conducive for me to continue to be in after a while, just because ultimately lack of standards in education in Texas, and I just didn't want to be a part of that. I wanted to be, again, like I said, I believe in public service. I believe in doing things for the community and doing things for people. And so kind of going into local government and local government administration in particular was kind of a fairly natural transition for me. And one of the things I've definitely found, and it's certainly been commented on by a number of people to me, is that some of the skill set you pick up as a school teacher and dealing with families, dealing with kids, there's some good carryover. Obviously, there's going to be some gaps here, but again, went back, got my master's degree, and certainly addressed some of those. But overall, the service mentality kind of pushed me through into this path that I've been on.
Okay. Now, you married?
I am indeed.
And yeah, I saw that. And kids?
3 of them, ages
kids.
7, 5, and 3, a girl and 2 boys.
Oh, how cool.
Oh, yes, as people say, yeah, busy man.
Is your wife stay at home, or is she working out of the home?
She stays at home, but she has the ability actually to work from home. She works for a small boutique investment firm, still actually in Fredericksburg, Texas. But honestly, as long as she has an internet connection and a phone, she's pretty well good to go. She's obviously scaled back quite a bit than she was. Certainly we were living there. Certainly we were living in the Dallas area as well. as far as the number of clients that she handles through that. But it's also, we are very, very fortunate, very blessed to be able to, for her to have been afforded the opportunity to be able to stay home with the kids as they've kind of transitioned out. Because my daughter will be starting 3rd grade later this fall at 487 in Harrington. My son will be starting kindergarten, so I just have the 3.5-year-old left at home.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome, and it's fantastic that your wife can be at home and doing the same work, helping to make the finances work. And you're right now you're commuting from that home residence to Harrington to work?
Yes, every day.
Okay, and that's how far of a trip?
Oh gosh, it's about an hour and 15 minutes.
Each way?
Yes. But again, as someone who lived in the Dallas area for a while, that's not too much of a commute.
No, it gives you good time also to get your thoughts together and plan.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about, well, I'll tell you before we go into talking about Harrington, because we're going to cut away for a break here in just a minute. But when we come back, I want to talk to you about Harrington, the town, the size, and the demographics of it, and anything you want to share about it. So we will be right back. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, Matt Townsend, who's the city manager at Harrington. We're visiting with Matt today, not only about Harrington, but about how he got into the position and how he went from being a school teacher, really, to moving into the government field and becoming city manager at Harrington. So now we're at Harrington. Let's shift over to that. You've shared with the viewers about that you have a wife and 3 kids, and she's able to stay at home, and your youngest is a 3.5-year-old, and you're on the road about an hour and 15 minutes each direction to come to work, and until you can find housing in Harrington that's suitable, then you're traveling a lot, and I understand it. So tell us about Harrington.
Well, Harrington's a small town, obviously just under 3,000. Depending on what census data you look at, you're looking at either 26, 25, or somewhere around 2,400 people. We have about 1,200 odd taps in the town, so that puts it probably, in my opinion, a little bit closer between the 24 and the 2,500 mark. Obviously, with 2020 census coming up next year, we'll have a more accurate picture as to the exact population of the town. But as always, I'm certainly looking to grow the town in various ways, and I hope that people will start moving into Harrington, or certainly, if not that, at least the surrounding area. But Harrington obviously was, as you're probably well aware, Doug, a rail town for many years.
I remember that.
And obviously Union Pacific still continues to have a big presence there. However, since roughly, I would say, the 1950s, 1960s, Harrington has seen a bit of a population decline, I guess from its kind of heydays back in the immediate post-war era of around 5,000 plus people to about the population that we have now. And as Harrington has kind of transitioned that, they've kind of started to note some of the effects of loss of population, but also some of the things that have gone around, not just in Kansas, but nationwide as well. And it's ultimately a matter of how small towns want to contend with these things. Issues obviously like population loss, reduction in services, lack of resources, i.e. money, and then also some of the urban blight issues, or not urban, but I guess rural blight issues that kind of come along with those things. And the big questions now are, where does Harrington want to kind of position itself to move forward into the future, and how do we want to address some of these issues that we have? I mean, again, like I said, the blight being one, aging infrastructure is another one. And again, we're not alone in that. I mean, that is anyone, everywhere. Even my previous employer, the city of Wichita, we had a lot of what we refer to as, certainly deferred maintenance issues here, there, and elsewhere. And obviously, clearly, the city of Harrington, with its $7.8 million budget, does not quite have the budget that the city of Wichita has to address some of these problems, which means that as a small town, and this is one of the things I really like about small towns too, is you get to be creative with it. You get to move a little bit more rapidly than your larger, more bureaucratic, more established organizations. And I kind of think that's a good thing. But the ultimate thing there, and another thing I do want to say about Harrington, one of the things that drew me to it, and we didn't quite get a chance to talk about this earlier, is during my interview process, and certainly when I was talking to the city commission and the residents in town, some of the business people, and certainly some of the staff as well, everyone in Harrington that I've encountered has just been extraordinarily friendly and also very welcoming to me. And as someone who is a definitive, as we used to say in Fredericksburg, Auslander to the community, it's a very gratifying thing, and it's something that my wife and kids have also been appreciative of when they've come up to visit, when we've been looking for stuff, or just as we've kind of interacted with folks out in the community. But kind of all of that to say, it's certainly been one of the added pluses of it, just that friendliness, that welcomingness, and it makes small town living such a terrific thing.
You find sometimes with a town, let's take Harrington for instance, because I knew Harrington is the rail town, and so they had a good cash flow coming in. They had engineers, conductors, people working on the railroad, and so the rental property was in good shape. A lot of potential tenants for rental property, didn't have much for empties, and a good cash flow coming through. And then those jobs left, and of course the town goes this way for a while. I'm talking about the employment portion of it. But what I sometimes see with a small town, just like when Chapman went through the tornado, well, we had one of two things we can do. We can say, all right, you know what, we're going to reach down, grab our bootstraps, we're going to pull ourselves up. And we're not going to be judged by what's happened to Chapman by the tornado. We're going to be judged by how we recover from it. And so what will people say 10 years from now, following the tornado, 15 years? Did we embrace it? Did we work to build back? Or did we just say, well, I can't do it because I'm just a small town? Chapman took the approach, reached down, grabbed the bootstraps, and went to work, and it's come back stronger than it was. And so what is the attitude for Harrington in the situation? Because one attitude you can say, we're just a small town, there isn't any jobs, can't do anything, so we just sort of exist. Or the other is, well, tell you what, let's roll up our sleeves and let's make this town what we really want it to be.
Let me go ahead and tell you that the latter is definitely the attitude in Harrington. And let me go ahead and tell you too, there was actually just last night, late yesterday afternoon, there's a community group that came around, and they were helping some of the business and certainly property owners in our downtown area right off Broadway kind of clean up some of their storefronts and do that. Obviously, like on the local government side, we can't go into private property, right. But this volunteer group went out, they were helping out, they were cleaning windows, they were kind of like touching things up here, there, and that level and that kind of community pride. This is also our community cleanup week that we've been having for the last week. And what the city has done is, honestly, we've commissioned a couple of big roll-off dumpsters for people to come and get rid of refuse, things out of their yard, their basements, their houses, their rental properties, and whatever, and how have you, just in kind of an effort to clean up the town. Because again, one of those things, as you come into a town, as you're well aware, especially a small town, appearance is a very important factor. And people, I think, are very cognizant of this. But Harrington also, from my perspective, like I said, coming in, they are very much ready for change. As far as what that change is going to end up looking like, we're still trying to figure that out. I'm in the process of strategic planning with City Commission in Harrington, and we're looking into several options of effectively kind of answering those questions that Chapman has kind of started to address of what do we want to be in the future? Yeah, we were a rail town. What is it going to be? Is it going to be a recreational destination? Is it going to be a bedroom community? And ultimately, once the community kind of comes together and they can kind of determine that overall arching vision, we can determine that then we as city staff can start taking the steps that are necessary to get us to that point that they want to be. But no, I would definitely say that the folks that I have encountered in Harrington, they are definitely of the hardworking variety, and they do have pride in the community, and they do want it to move forward. And there is a lot of, as I stated just a moment ago, energy in the town, a lot of desire to want to do that, because they recognize the challenges that Harrington has had over the last several decades, and that honestly the status quo was no longer an acceptable approach, and they had to start doing things different. So again, it's been a very fortunate situation for me to step into as manager, to have people that are really willing to take those next steps, even though we haven't necessarily determined what specifically it's going to be. But by golly, we're ready for change and we're ready to move forward.
Well, much of that comes from the top. So when the city manager comes in and says, we can do this, there isn't anything here that we can't fix. And if we do it collectively, and if you get that community spirit going, and it sounds like you've got it going, if you get that community spirit going, then it makes that just is contagious.
Yes,
all
and
the way
also
around.
The support from my elected officials as well is
of
critical for anyone.
Oh yeah.
And just having their voices out in the community reflected of that desire for progress and that desire for change, very important.
Yeah, it is. We're going to cut away, take a break, because that's very important. And we'll be right back. You're watching Stories That Matter. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, Matt Townsend, from City Manager for the City of Herington. We're talking about small towns because Kansas is made up of mostly small towns. All of them are unique. All of them are special. Some can go through some challenging times. Some turn it around real quickly and they get going. You can have a catastrophe that happens and some town really rallies around it. And sometimes the town says, oh, well, we can't do anything. And I have found in the past that much of the leadership of the town is what brings that feeling to the town. Because if the leadership says, we don't have any money, we can't do anything, and city manager says, well, good luck to everybody, and we're on your side, and good luck, and here's some letters to make you get moving faster because we're telling you to clean your mess up. And then there's others that say, we're behind you. We can't give you money, and we can't do this. But you know what? If you get this stuff piled up here, our high loader can come in, pick this debris up, and we'll get it hauled off for you, because that would be a job for many. And so things like that. What's Harrington got going?
Well, like I said, that community cleanup event that's been going on this last week is a prime example of that. It was actually so successful. We actually had to get 2 additional roll-off dumpsters yesterday morning because they were not able to quite honestly keep up with demand, just because there was such a need in the community and such a desire in the community to start offloading some of that refuse and doing that. Now,
people, homeowners and people living in the community filling up the dumpsters,
yes.
And you got to get them unloaded, picked up, unloaded, and bring back.
Take them over to Abilene at the transfer station and
awesome.
bring them back quickly.
Awesome.
I'll go ahead and tell you, by Wednesday, we had already had that first dumpster. It had already been taken to the transfer station 3 times, Doug. And so Thursday morning, or rather Wednesday afternoon, we kind of sat down, we looked at the situation, some of the stuff kind of piling up there around there, and was like, well, yeah, let's go ahead and get some more. I think it would be a good idea. And honestly, the more we can do to kind of help out, facilitate that sort of thing, get some of these folks obviously on board by helping them out by offering the service of just, hey, we're going to have some roll-offs. You have to bring it yourself, of course. We can't come by and do it. But at the same time, just clearly there's a heavy desire in the community. And that's something that I've certainly definitely appreciated over this past week. But also, in general, like I said, just that desire of people to pitch in, to help, to want to do something, because it makes a big impact. And just a moment ago, we were talking about just having some of these small things that you can start to do, these small steps that you can take in the community. Some people might view this as kind of a bigger step, but overall, just doing these little things and kind of getting used to a certain way of, I don't know, community involvement, a certain way of approaching how we think about our community and kind of the level of pride and how we want it to look, not just now, but in the future. I think that's a critical aspect of it. And like I said, it's these little steps that you can take to kind of get to where you want to be. And certainly I will say the residents of Harrington are taking those steps.
Good. You know, that's awesome, because one of the things that happened, I think, and I believe that this is true, we're close to Fort Riley, so depending upon the number of troops and families and that need off-post housing, why sometimes what happens is they're no different than you and I would be. We would drive through a town with our family and say, well, do I like this town? You know, the distance, how far am I traveling? What do they have for it? Do they have a grocery store? Do they have restaurant? And what's the neighborhood generally look like? We're moving into a dangerous spot because I'm not moving my family into that. Mm-hmm. And so they come in and begin to look at it, at a town. And if they see a town that's, you know, that has that enthusiasm like you're talking about and making changes and everything's picking up. Mm-hmm. From the standpoint of, we painted this, you know, the things that just are simple enough to do, but they take some hard work to do. Mm-hmm. Look at all the debris piled up here. They don't care about it. And now their neighbor doesn't care about it. Mm-hmm. But if this one cleans up, then this one's sticking out like a sore thumb. Mm-hmm. And then this one cleans up, and pretty soon you have a different town. And I'm assuming that's part of what you want to have happen is cars come up, because you got a main road coming in on 77.
Yes, we do.
And you got a lake,
mm-hmm.
Harrington Lake.
Two
lakes. What's the other lake?
We have the reservoir, and then what they refer to as the Old City Lake.
Oh, yeah.
The reservoir is a 547-acre lake, and the Old City Lake is just a touch under 100 acres. Okay. So 2 pretty substantive bodies of water that we have just on the west side of town that are city assets. And it's one of the things that actually kind of amazed me, talking to my former colleagues with the city of Wichita, after I'd been in discussions and after I'd been appointed by City Commission that I was going to be coming up here, none of them knew that Harrington had those lakes. No one. And that floored me. That really and truly surprised me because, again, as I mentioned, those are huge assets for the town. Those are major recreational destinations, or at least they certainly should be for a lot of people. Now, we do have campers out there. We do have a lot of, or not a lot, we do have some fishermen that go out there.
You have cabins out there too, though, don't you?
We have a handful, and then they're also on the Old City Lake side. Right. There are a number of lake residences and some other residences out there, and that's good. But yeah, we have some rentals out there. Like I said, fishing docks and things of that nature, just for people to go out and, like I said, go out to recreate. But the fact that people weren't as aware of it, again, just really took me by surprise, because I felt that was something, and it's something that we have certainly started doing in promoting the lakes, even just getting things out there on some of the radio stations. Hey, come camp, come fish at Harrington Lakes. You'll enjoy it.
And so these are within the city limits?
They are just
are they
west,
extension of
effectively just outside of, just due west of the town. If you look it up on Google Maps, you'll see them right there.
Yeah. So plenty of room for growth in Harrington.
Quite a bit.
Yeah,
That's also been a topic of discussion with some of our residents and some of the people within the region, and certainly within Dickinson County as well. Because that's one thing I have certainly noted, and certainly something I'm a huge fan of too, is that none of us are in this alone. I mean, we're a small community. Chapman's a small community. Abilene is too. So are a lot of these other ones. And there's no reason that we shouldn't have a lot more, quite frankly, just kind of regional cooperation and regional efforts. Simply because we can do a lot more when we cooperate and when we go out and try to get these things done. And I mentioned the lakes in particular with Dickinson County because obviously, clearly, that's an asset for the city of Harrington, but it is also an asset for the residents of Dickinson County as well. Yeah. And it's a critical thing to make sure that we are exploring opportunities of what we can conceivably do together, because I guarantee you it's going to be a lot more than we could do on our own.
Sure, I agree with you. And Harrington, of course, has the things that if you were coming from the outside looking in, you'd say, okay, where do we shop for groceries? They have a grocery store.
We do have a grocery store.
Dollar General. And,
yes, we do.
And what else is within the community that would meet the needs of somebody moving in?
Well, obviously, we have a number of restaurants as well that are in the community. We have a few shops on our kind of central downtown area on Broadway and also May. We certainly have Old Pharmacy. We also have the Harrington Municipal Hospital as well,
that's
which
a big
is a
plus.
tremendous benefit for a lot of our residents because although we didn't necessarily touch on demographics earlier, there are a good number of older folks in our community, and it's critical access for them to be able to go to that hospital and get their treatments.
Absolutely. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. You're watching Stories That Matter with Matt Townsend. Welcome back to the final segment of our show today with Matt Townsend on Stories That Matter. And Matt, before we had to cut away to break, I know I cut you off from other things that the community has because we needed to cut to break. But schools in the area?
Yes.
Harrington has an excellent school district, relatively new schools.
It does indeed. The elementary school, I believe, was built in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. And I know they're currently also rehabilitating certain areas of the high school as well. No, 487 is a very, very good school district. And honestly, it was one of the big selling points for my wife and I when we were looking to relocate because of that. And that's a very important thing that I mentioned earlier as far as like wanting to get people into your community, especially, parents of young families. Coming in, the school district is a critical component, but also some of those other quality of life amenities too. We also have, we are the westernmost extension of the Flint Hills Regional Trail in Harrington, which is still obviously under development by Kansas Wildlife Parks and Tourism, but it ranges all the way from Harrington in the west, all the way to Osawatomie in the east. And that is a huge attraction for a lot of people that are interested, obviously, in hiking, biking, or certainly horseback riding along the trail. And that is another thing that we certainly want to develop going forward in Harrington, kind of beefing up those quality of life amenities. Because as you mentioned earlier, basically when people are coming through town, what are they seeing? What are their takeaways of Harrington? And we obviously want them to be highly positive.
Well, and you're headed that way with it. Matt, thank you so much for being on the show.
Appreciate it.
I'm going to be anxious to follow what you're doing in Harrington because I think they've made an excellent hire and I think you're going to do a good job. I love the enthusiasm you're bringing to it. Thanks for watching Stories That Matter.